Stevens is not repressed. I need you to understand this before we go any further. The common reading of the remains of the day is that here's a man who buried his feelings so deep he lost the woman he loved, lost his chance at happiness, lost everything to British Reserve. That reading is comfortable. It lets us pity him. Ishiguro is doing something far more unsettling. Stevens knows exactly what he's doing. He chooses dignity, his word, his obsession, over love, over morality, over his own father dying upstairs. And the devastating thing is, he keeps choosing it. Even at the end, even after everything, he decides to go back to Darlington Hall and practice his banter. He is not a man who missed his chance. He is a man who saw the door and walked past it, again and again, because walking through would have required becoming someone else. The book is framed as a driving trip through the English countryside. Stevens has been given a week off by the new American owner of the estate, and he's going to visit Miss Kenton, now Mrs. Ben, his former colleague, a housekeeper he worked alongside for years. A woman who once stood in his pantry and asked him, without asking, to give her a reason to stay. He didn't. She married someone else. And now, decades later, he's driving to see her, telling himself it's about staffing problems at the hall. Ishiguro lets us see through this immediately. Stevens cannot. Or rather, Stevens will not. The flashbacks reveal a man who served Lord Darlington during his collaboration with the Nazis. Stevens knew. He knew about the firing of the Jewish maids. He knew about the meetings with Herr Ribbentrop. He knew his employer was being used, at best, and was complicit, at worst. And Stevens's response? It was not his place to have opinions. A great butler serves. A great butler does not question. This is where the book becomes almost unbearable. Because Stevens has built an entire philosophy of life around not having to make moral choices. Dignity, in his framework, means serving so completely that the self disappears. No opinions, no desires, no love that might interfere with the silver being polished correctly. He has made himself into a function. Miss Kenton sees this. She spends years trying to crack him open. She brings flowers into his pantry. She teases him about his reading habits. She stands too close, lingers too long, manufactures reasons to be in rooms with him. And in one extraordinary scene, she tries to see what book he's hiding, a sentimental romance it turns out, and he physically blocks her, backs against the wall, refuses to let her see this single piece of evidence that he has an inner life. He calls this dignity. Ishiguro wants us to see it as terror. Stevens is not reserved. He is afraid. Afraid that if he allows himself to want something, to love someone, to have opinions about right and wrong, then the entire structure he's built will collapse. And what would be left? A man who wasted his life serving a Nazi sympathizer. A man who let his father die alone because there was a dinner party downstairs. A man who had love offered to him and said no because saying yes would have meant admitting he was a person, not a butler. The meeting with Miss Kenton at the end is Ishiguro at his most precise. They sit in a tea room. She tells him her marriage is fine now, that she's content, that there was a time she thought she'd made a mistake, but that time has passed. Stevens says nothing he should say. The bus comes. She leaves. And Stevens sits on a bench as the lights come on along the pier and thinks about how he might work on his banter. Readers want catharsis here. They want Stevens to break down, to finally feel it all. He doesn't. He notes that his heart is breaking. He uses those words. And then he decides to return to work and try to make Mr. Faraday laugh. This is not repression failing. This is repression succeeding. Stevens has gotten so good at being no one that even heartbreak becomes a problem to be managed, a feeling to be filed away. The title tells you everything. The remains of the day. Not the morning when choices were still possible. Not the afternoon when there was time to change course. The remains. What's left after everything that mattered has already happened. Stevens will spend those remains practicing banter, polishing silver, being dignified. He chose this. He's still choosing it. And Ishiguro refuses to let us believe he didn't know what he was giving up.